Okay, we're recording. Here we go. Hey everyone, welcome to the first episode of Quest Like a Pro. I'm Noah Barnett, the founder of Purple Shadow Gaming, and I'm joined by my fantastic co-host, Andy. What's up, Andy? How are you doing?
Hello, I'm doing great. Excited to be here.
Yeah, and tonight we're thrilled to really launch our journey into the world of Disney Lorcana. You know, one of our missions here at Purple Shadow Gaming is to explore how top players navigate the game, from their preparation to handling the most intense moments. And we're inviting you to learn us alongside us. And so tonight we have our first guest. And so we are going to learn how to quest like Jonathan Lam. Jonathan, welcome to the show.
Thanks. Thanks for having me on.
Jonathan Lam, you're better known as LamChopss online. So if people don't know Jonathan, they definitely know LamChopss.
So most people in the community know me as LamChopss. That's just my gamer tag. I am a Blue Steel One Trick, and that's the deck I've been bringing to every single tournament ever since I started competing.
Yeah, and before we dive into Lorcana strategy, I love to unpack, how did you actually get started in competitive TCGs? And what led you to Disney Lorcana?
So I started off, actually, this is my first card game, and I did collect Pokemon when I was growing up, and I've always fancied competing with other people, but never had a chance to as a kid. So when I was visiting one of my friends at a card store that he worked at, I saw it was the day before Lorcana released, and I was like, oh, this is a cool new game. I want to try this out. And so I gave my best shot, and the rest is history.
That's incredible. And so did you play online TCGs or any other gaming, or is this truly the first TCG or kind of competitive game you've been playing?
So I've played video games very competitively before, mostly Valorant, but other than, I think actually a lot of the skills translate and according to the way you practice or the way you approach competitions or high stress environments. I think that a lot of the skills transfer, but maybe not the card aspect, logical side thinking of the games. But yeah, I did play Valorant pretty competitively. Moving to Lorcana, I did notice that a lot of the skills I learned in Valorant actually helped me in Lorcana as well.
Yeah. And what would be some of those attributes? I think that's something people think about. They love the game, they love the IP, they love the stories. But what are the skills and attributes that you really need to play at a competitive level? What do you think that ingredient set is?
I think the first and foremost thing that's the most important is loving the game and having a true passion for actually just enjoying it and having fun. So I think that that's what keeps the feel going, keeps you trekking on this hard journey of improving and sometimes taking hard losses. I think that enjoying the game is the most important thing. Second, I would say is probably focusing on the journey of improving rather than winning and losing. I think a lot of people, they get caught up in a tough loss and then they will take it hard on themselves, or they'll say, not a good player, I should have done better. And then there's just a lot of negative emotions that don't really streamline towards the process of improving as a player. Sometimes negative emotions can push you to be better, but that's not really the most efficient way. It's really like objectively analyzing each situation. I made a mistake here. That's okay. I'll learn from that. And that's the only thing you take away to the next game. I think that's super, super important so you don't get burnt out, you don't get discouraged, but you have actually encouragement and positive reinforcement to actually become a better player.
Yeah, I think that's so key. And it's something I struggled with as a player. Andy, I don't know if you've struggled with this, but I'm like, why am I losing all the time? And it's no, as we talk about at Purple Shadow Gaming, you always want to leave the table better or leave the game better. So that's a loss, a win, whatever. But it's so hard sometimes because you're like, oh, I knew it, I had it. And I just chose path A and it should have been path B. And I missed it. So totally.
I sometimes do get in my head at times, but like you said, Lamb, it is important to come away with a lesson, not just a win or a loss.
Yeah, especially in card games, I think this is something that sometimes it's hard for people to realize is that sometimes when you lose, it's completely not up to you. Even if you play your best, sometimes it's just up to the cards and there's nothing you could have done better. So sometimes losing, there's nothing to be disappointed about. And sometimes winning, maybe there's a few lessons that you could have learned along that game.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned that you'd played video games to learn, but are there other things that you've done outside of the game that you feel has kind of shaped your success in Lorcana? Are there things that you do outside that have kind of made you a better player?
Currently, not too much. It's just been a lot of testing. But previously, when I took games very seriously, I would have a very strict schedule of eating at certain times, exercising at certain times, waking up at certain times, just to kind of streamline the physical aspect of being able to focus and be streamlined in that area. Whereas, like, if you are struggling physically, sometimes it can take away from your ability to focus for long periods of time or really get through a long tournament.
Yeah, it's brutal some of these days. Like my son plays as well, and I'm like, drink water, eat granola,
Yes.
like do something to keep your mind sharp because you don't realize how much calories you're burning just by like thinking and playing for 6, 8, 10, 12 hours. So definitely makes sense. And I think we want to dive more into that, like on that strategic preparation. It's the part of the game that like many don't talk about, but it's super important.
You were talking about playtesting. So like how do you balance your time between playtesting and like actual tournament preparation?
Yeah. So I think that there is a lot of skills that you learn from actually playing in tournaments, and then there's a lot of skills that you learn from testing by yourself. And this being my first card game, I really felt the experience difference between me and people who have been playing card games for 10, 20 years. When I would go to a tournament, I wouldn't know to call a judge for certain things, or I wouldn't feel confident in my place there. And so I think that there's a lot of things that I learn over just these few DLCs I've been to. But besides that, as you're saying, the playtesting side, I think that it's really just focusing on not really spamming games and spamming reps as many as you can. It's really, you need to have a focused, very detailed analysis of your deck and other decks and how you're going to build your game plan and solidify your game plan versus theirs. And generally, the decision making that comes separately from that, but having a general game plan against each deck and knowing really what other decks' strengths and weaknesses and how you're going to attack those is the most important part of having a foundation of, okay, these are good plays, these are bad plays, and I'm going to try to pilot my deck towards these good plays that are more efficient at dealing with my opponent.
And how do you document that? Yeah, I'm so curious because again, I think this is something players talk about, but it's like, what does that actually look like? Do you have like a spreadsheet? Are you like tracking games? How do you manage that?
Yeah, so for the first few turns against every single deck, I'll write down every single possible starting line for the first maybe 4 turns, and I will write down every single possible starting line for the opposing deck and my deck. So, and then I will run through the scenarios, and by the end of those 4 turns, I'll see my opponent had this lore, he had this board state, I had this amount of cards, I had this lore, I had these creatures on board, and is this situation objectively worse or better than the other ones, right? So then you can actually quantify, okay, having these cards in my starting hand versus this matchup is objectively better than having this set of opening. And sometimes that's very nuanced, but when you really grind through those opening lines, it becomes very, very clear. Okay, these are the exact cards that I want. And these are the exact decisions I want to make, whether to trade in against opponents like early boards. So it's really just like a chess opening, and just memorizing that can take a lot of the early stress off of the game, off the early turns, and really just help you make good mulliganing decisions so that you can be best suited to enter the mid game to pilot it well.
That's very interesting. I like how that you like go through your first 4 turns, I believe you said, and just like decide what your mulligans are. Since you do play blue steel, because as you said, one trick pony, how do you try to preparing your deck for like an important tournament? Do you just try to see what the meta is, what the majority is, or do you try to spread out your game plan?
Yes, so there's the aspect of trying to judge what's in the room, basically trying to find out what are the percentage of like the other decks that will be represented at a tournament. So you can find out, okay, well, if the room's going to be heavy red blue, then I can add these cards like Aerial and Dime to tech against them to make those matchups better. If it's against aggressive decks, I can add more early removal or more early bodies to counter those. That's definitely a big portion of having success in a big tournament. And I would say that that's probably the majority of the time that we spend testing. Me and my partner, we need to find out what's the easiest way to deal with opponents and what are the problem decks in the meta, right? So what are the problem decks and what are the ways to address those?
How do you decide when like your deck is tournament ready? You know, like I'm the type of player, Andy's been there. It's 10 p.m. the night before the tournament, and I'm like, I'm switching to this, or like I'm taking these out and I'm putting this in. And then the next morning I wake up and I'm like, no, I'm going to do it this way. What's your approach to being like, this is locked in, like I'm committed? Is it the morning of? Is it the night of? Is it 5 days ahead of time? Like, how do you think about that?
I would say it's usually a week or two beforehand because I really only play one deck. It's not like I would switch decks. I really only bring one deck. So when I travel to these big tournaments, I just have like my backpack with some clothes, my one deck, my playmat, and that's like all, right? So I don't really have the option to make many adjustments to my deck. So maybe that helps a little bit with not second guessing myself. But I would be locked in before I even travel out there. And max I would change is like I would bring like maybe one tech card where that I was debating on like maybe the second aerial or just having one or two aerials. That would be like probably the biggest difference depending on how much red blue there is in the room. So yeah, I don't really change my deck very often, and I would say I lock it in quite every single time the meta changes, you have to change your deck. And that is, yeah, so when green purple was very heavy, dominating the meta in the beginning of the set, my deck list looked very different than it did today. But after things died down with green purple, now after that meta shift, I pretty much locked in my deck. And unless the meta changes again, I'm going to keep it this way. If it does, then I'll have to start reconsidering, okay, I want to better address these problems now that these are less prevalent and these are more prevalent. So I would have to make some slight adjustments.
So there was a question we asked a small group of people. We said, hey, we're interviewing LamChopps. What should we ask them? And the question that came up was, why blue steel? And like, what was it about this deck that you chose this pony? Like, there's the plethora of ponies that you could have chosen. And you were like, nope, this is mine. I'm going for it and I'm doubling down on it. When so many pros in Lorcana communities said, nope, blue steel is like dead end road. The only person that can win with that is LamChopps. Like, what? How is that possible? So yeah, why this deck, and how have you been able to stick with it so long?
Yeah, so I think originally my main reason for playing this deck was just because I like the color blue. And I think that blue
So does
steel,
Ravensburger.
yeah, well,
They love blue.
they like blue and red though, and that makes me very sad. You know, RB, Ravensburger, actually stands for red blue.
You
That's
heard
why
it here first.
it's a conspiracy theory. Yeah, so it's because my favorite color is blue. I started off with the blue steel starter deck when I first started playing the game. And I really was enticed by the idea of Bell and Whole New World in set one, but there weren't enough tools for that. So I played red purple for a little bit in set two. Well, actually, well, my main deck in set one was the blue steel starter deck, and I played Amber Sapphire. And I think that Amber Sapphire, just the ability to ramp to get big bodies on board, get big bombs, and have a lot of card draw, that's kind of translated to blue steel later on because Amber Sapphire is not very viable anymore. So I played a little bit red purple in set two, and then ever since set three forwards, I played blue steel. That's the most attractive thing about this deck is that it really rewards your time playing it. Really, it's a very high skill cap deck, and it has a very low floor. So when you first start playing the deck, you might have a lot of trouble. Sometimes if you make a single wrong decision, you could just instantly lose the game. But as you learn the lines, as you learn all the ins and outs of the deck, it really, really pays off because blue steel has a very even matchup spread. And really the way that you gain percentage points over your opponent is by piloting it perfectly. And if you pilot it wrong, you're just going to lose every game. But if you pilot it perfectly, you can really push that win percentage above 50% against every single deck in the field, which I think is super valuable going into big tournaments. You're locking in one deck. I don't want to feel like, oh, I got this bad match. I am so sad, right? But against every single deck I play against, I feel like I have a good shot to win, and it's on me to be able to pilot it well. And I think that I have a connection with this deck now, an affinity of sorts. Some people say it's the heart of the cards, but I think that blue steel just rewards me for being the biggest patron of it. And a lot of the times I will win a game with zero cards in hand. I just top deck the wheel, and I know it's there. It's so strange. It makes no sense. There's no rhyme or reason, but I'll know that the wheel is on the top of my deck, and I'm fully confident I draw it, sing wheel, and win the game. And I think it's just like, I don't know. I love blue steel, and it loves me too.
Whole New World is a very powerful card.
Mm-hmm.
There's a time in my life where I was like, if I'm not playing the best card, also known as Whole New World, like what am I even doing with my life? I've changed my tune a little bit. Now I just can't play without Hiram in my deck. But that's a separate.
So to continue on with like the tournament talk, like I'm sure you've experienced a tough loss before, and like how did you experience that in that competition, and how did you handle it?
Yeah. So most of my DLCs, actually, the two DLCs that I made like top 8, top 4, I actually started off pretty bad on the day. I believe that at Vegas, I started 1-1-1, and then I ended up going like 2-1-2, I believe, and then I ended up 6-1-2. So, and then at Melbourne, I was 1-2, or I was 2-1. So I started off 2-0, and I went 2-1, and then I won 3 in a row, and then I did my last round. So I kind of had this trend of starting off pretty poorly and then just like winning every single game after that. I believe that it really, yeah, it really has to do with having a strong mental and trying to keep yourself from getting tilted from losses. Sometimes I would just like give up. I just throw in the towel. Like, okay, well, whatever happens, happens. I have a strong belief that whatever happens at a tournament, whether you win or lose, it happened for a reason. And there's not much reason to try to fight that or like be upset about the result. Everything happens for a reason. So when I start off pretty poorly, I'll just do my best. If I don't make it, it's not meant to be. And I tried my best and I prepared as much as I could. I played as well as I could. And that's something to be proud of in itself, not winning or losing.
It's great advice. Yeah, great advice.
I feel like I can be the same way sometimes. Just like after a loss, I'm just like, all right, there's round 2 now. There's round 3, and when am I gonna do better? Or like that game is gone. I can't control it no more, so I can't let it control me.
Yeah, exactly.
What advice would you give players struggling with this, like the lack of resilience of losing?
So interesting. What advice I would give to players who take losses hard? I would say it's really just a distraction. I think that we have to pass the initial identification of the problem or the mistake. If it's bothering you, if it's in your headspace, it's just a distraction. It really takes away from your ability to play the game and think clearly. And that's a big nerf on your part. So you really want to have a clear mind, just focus on the present and do your best in the situation that's presented to you on the board. It doesn't matter what happened in the past. It doesn't matter if you threw a game. Like, it's just a distraction at that point. So keep that in mind for a later game. Maybe if you get in the same situation, try to recall that memory so that you don't do the same thing again. If it's bothering you, if it's pestering you, just think of it as actually improving here would be to let go of this past mistake. And that is in its own way a form of improving my gameplay.
I am curious, like you even said there, making mistakes in gameplay or reflecting on maybe a matchup that didn't go the way you thought it was going to go. Do you have a process for how you might document that after tournaments? Or like, what does your documentation look like at a tournament or after a tournament? You talked about it a little bit within playtesting, but as far as like truly reflecting on your tournament results, how do you think about that? What is your practices there?
So for tournaments, when I do make mistakes, I usually don't write things down. I've been trying to write things down now every tournament I go to as a tool for other people to learn through my play. But for myself, usually when I make a mistake, it'll live in my head for the next week. It won't like tilt me during the tournament. I will make sure not to let it affect me during the tournament. But when I'm a week later, when I wake up, I'll be like, oh, what a wonderful day. I'll think, why didn't I quest that Tamatoa? And I'll think about it and I'll make sure I never make that mistake again. So most of it is just memorization of, oh, that was horrible. Let's not do that again. But as for documentation for mistakes, I think it can be helpful for newer players who haven't had as many reps on their decks, so they can actually start to identify patterns in their gameplay so that they can start to change those habits. But I think for someone who has had thousands of reps on their deck, those bad habits kind of get thrown to the side a little bit. And it's more like, okay, I made a really bad decision in this moment. I regret it a lot, and I'm not going to do that again.
I'm just thankful I'm not the only person who dreams about Lorcana plays and like the different play patterns in my head. And again, as a player of Sapphire, I've quested with Tamatoa or played Tamatoa on the wrong turn too early, too many times. Me and Tamatoa have a strangly relationship. That's silly crab. But speaking of, you said at the beginning of this is that to be a good player, you have to just love the IP, the story. You have to love the game. You have to play with that. And so we want to do like this fun, rapid Disney round. We've talked about a lot of like heavy stuff, like mental challenges and resilience and all of these different things, but let's put that aside and have a little fun. So I would love to know, Jonathan, what your favorite Disney character you would want on your Lorcana dream team. Now, it doesn't have to be what they currently do, like disconnect from the actual card design. But if you were like putting together a team of Disney characters to go to battle with or go on a quest with, who would you want on the dream team?
Would it be Lorcana, like according to their Lorcana abilities, or just like the characters of Disney?
Just the characters. Like, who are you bringing on the journey? You said you're going to Japan soon. Like, who's coming with you on the adventure, you know?
That is interesting. I've never thought about this. I think I would for sure like Rapunzel. I think healing is pretty OP. Who else? I think Mulan is pretty cool. I do like Big Hero 6. I don't know if I can take all 6 of them, but at least one of them would do. Or Baymax would be fine. So Rapunzel, Mulan, Baymax, and who else? There's so many great characters. They're just... Oh, Cogsworth. I love Cogsworth. Cogsworth has to be on the team. Yeah. I think those are the
you have one more seat, because we're like building it's almost like our Marvel Rivals team. Like, who's our 5 that we're taking out?
I feel like you just built a Valorant team without even knowing it.
I would probably need... Genie sounds good. Yeah.
That
sounds quite strong, being able to grant any wish.
So you have Genie, Rapunzel, Mulan, Cogsworth, and Baymax. That feels sick. I love that. I love it. Next question. What is the best card in Lorcana right now?
Including the new set or just set 6?
We'll just say set 6. What is the best card in Lorcana? No wrong
best
answers.
Card. I would have to say, in terms of power level alone, probably Whole New World. Just has the complete capacity to just flip a game just by playing it once. And I don't think many other cards have the ability to do that.
It's true.
Absolutely. The next rapid fire question was, what's the strangest play or interaction you've ever seen in a match? Like, what's something just wild that happened that you were like, holy crap, this is incredible and awkward?
Wild, as in like a bad experience or a good experience or a neutral?
It could be a good thing. It can be however you define it, Jonathan. Yeah.
I won't
the one
say
you're thinking about right now. Yeah.
Oh, you want to know the one I'm thinking about right now? Oh gosh. Okay.
Right now, the first one that came to your mind.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I'm gonna not say any names, but in my last round of Vegas, I was 5-1-2, and I was playing to get into Top Cut. And I was against a Amber Emerald player. Okay. They nuked my hand so many times, and I kept wheeling them. I played 3 wheels, and they were down to maybe like 5 or 6 cards left in deck, and I drew my card for turn. He was going to win next turn. I have no way to deal with this board. I already used all my removal. He has a pretty wide board. I drew 1 card. I have no card drawn in my hand except for 1 Tamatoa, and I play it and draw a popsicle from my discard, and that popsicle I play it and draw a Visions, the one of Visions in my deck. I play the Visions and then find the wheel and then cast it to mill him. And then he has a fit of rage and he like slams his deck down and he's like, can't believe it. He's like freaking out. And I was just like, oh, well, that just happened. Yes, it was a little awkward. I won't say any names though, but it was an interesting experience.
Yeah.
That sounds like
incredible.
A wild experience.
For getting wheeled is just like, oh, you got to be kidding me.
There were like so many people. There's like crowds on both sides watching because we were like one of the last games to finish, and it was for our win in. So a lot of people were watching, and everyone was like, "Oh, that's so awkward." Yeah, it's a cool win though.
Nice way to make Top Cut.
Yes, it is. Yeah, very lucky.
So we have 3 more rapid fire questions for you, Jonathan. The first one is, if you could have one superpower to use in tournaments, what would it be?
One superpower. Honestly, I don't like having edges over my opponents. So probably my superpower, if I could have one, it would probably be to never get tilted. I think that's a pretty good advantage for me. I think like mind reading came to mind, or like yeah, or like X-ray vision, but yeah, I don't think that would be fair. So I'll just go with never being tilted.
Good one.
Yeah. Do you have any pre-game rituals that you can't go without?
Yeah, so one thing I definitely do is I don't eat pretty much the whole day. That I compete. I had to learn it the hard way for my first few DLCs. At Atlanta, I ate something, I threw it all up, and then the next DLC, I ate something, I threw it all up. I was like, okay, maybe this isn't gonna work. So ever since then, I just don't eat. That's one of my rituals. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Generally, just wake up before the tournament and just go play. I don't really do too much because I don't want to use up my energy before the month.
Fair enough. Well, the last rapid fire question was from our community. They said, what new mechanic would you personally like to see Ravensburger introduce to the game that's not already here? So something that you were like, man, if this existed, that would be really neat.
Interesting. I was thinking of, this is like a silly idea. I don't know if this counts as a new mechanic, but I would like a shift quickly that puts your opponent's cards into their inkwells as a choice too. Either put your opponent's cards or your own cards into your inkwell. So it's like could be a removal. An actual new mechanic though,
Like, so their card into your inkwell?
possibly either that. Oh, I would really, really
That
like
could be cool.
Yeah, I would really, really like to put like be able to steal opponents' creatures. I think that's like super fun. That would make me
Mind
happy.
control.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think that would be really neat. I do think interacting with other people's cards and either taking it for a turn where it's almost like Jafar, some sort of like mind control where it's like I
Yeah.
get your character for one turn and it readies and it can't quest, but it can like challenge or something like that. That would be really, really neat.
Yeah, that
So
would be
there's
really
so
cool.
much of that. I come from Magic, so Magic is like all about taking other people's cards and doing
They
all
have that
sorts
in
of stuff.
Magic?
So that would be really neat. Yeah. It's
That's
pretty
cool.
crazy. Yeah, it's really awesome. I love winning with my opponent's creatures. It's super
That
fun.
that must feel amazing.
Well, Jonathan, it's been really, really a pleasure. We want to kind of wrap up with one final question, and that if there's, our community is really about helping people level up their game. We really want to focus on helping people compete and drive. There's so much of a thriving community around Lorcana, and we really thought this was where we wanted to focus. Like, how do we help people compete better, level up their game? What's one piece of advice you'd give to newer players looking to level up competitively? Like, what's the thing they should start with, focus on to get better?
Yeah. So one thing is definitely don't give up. If it feels hard at first, just keep at it and you'll eventually get there. I know that anyone who puts their mind to it can become a great player. The resource that I use the most in order to learn how to play in general and play Blue Steel specifically is I watched a lot of Sky's videos or his Twitch VODs, and that really is what honestly turned me from a new player into like someone that I would say is quite good at Blue Steel. And I think that watching other players play and watching professional players play and trying to understand their reasoning and thoughts behind each decision, especially when that decision differs from one that you would have made, I think that's a very, very valuable resource. And you can watch it over and over again. I actually played Sky in my last round at Atlanta for Let It Go, and I was able to destroy him because I watched him for like so many hours. I knew every single card in his deck. I was like, oh, you eat that card? Okay, I'm going to punish you so hard. And so, yeah, honestly, learning from watching good players play is very good. It's their concentrated knowledge of the game is it's just handed to you and it's just for you to grab. And I think that's a super good resource. Other than that, maybe like coaching or reading guides, I think is also just concentrated gold knowledge, just easy to grab and easy to consume and digest and start applying in your own games.
Absolutely. Yeah, watching gameplay has been huge for me. Well, thanks so much for tuning in, everyone. A huge thank you to you, Jonathan, for sharing your insights today. If you want to stay connected with Jonathan, definitely check him out on Metafy at LamChopss, LamChopss, LamChopss. Definitely check out his Metafy. He has sessions there for coaching. You got incredible guides. It looks like you have other content there. You're also on X, formerly Twitter, as LamChopsTCG. Definitely check that out. And you can find them in Discord chats and probably at the next DLC once those are announced. So definitely say hello and tell them you heard him on the podcast. So thanks again, Jonathan. I appreciate you.
Yeah. Thank you for having me on.
And if you want to stay connected with Quest Like a Pro, because we'll be interviewing other pros just like Jonathan, definitely visit purpleshadowgaming.com for updates on Quest Like a Pro. You can also get some cool gear. I'm even wearing some of it now. And even our partner, Viper Sleeves. You can pick those up at our website, purpleshadowgaming.com. Some pros have said they're the best Lorcana sleeves, so definitely check them out. Some even were playing them at North American Continentals. So definitely take that look, and we'll be back next time with more tips and stories to help you quest like a pro. We'll see you then. Wow, episode 1, Andy. What a incredible human. Not only is he one of the best pro players, I think the best blue steel player, but he's just a good human. He seems like a good hang.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you, Noah. I think he's such a genuine person. It was a blast to learn from a legend, a blue steel legend. He calls himself a one-trick pony, but why change what works for him?
Absolutely. He's been competing and driving results, again, in an environment where everyone else is like, blue steel is unplayable, it's no good, it's this, that, and the other. And every time a tournament you see, and it's like, Jonathan Lam, clearly blue steel still is surviving. So he's figured it out. And I think some of that is on the basis of just his preparation, his mindset. He mentioned chess plays, understanding how the lines go, playing thousands of games. That's how you become a pro, and that's how you quest like Jonathan Lam. What did you walk away with? What were some of the biggest takeaways for you?
His just resilience. I think both days for his DLCs, he said he started really poorly, and then he just continued grinding out the day. He takes one game at a time. He doesn't take anything from the previous game, the loss, the win. He's just moving forward, and that it pays off because he gets to the top cut. He's been top 4 and top 8 in 2 DLCs, so it's working.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. I did appreciate, because it's so interesting how you talk to different players, and some say, you don't want to be playing Monday's deck when you could be playing Friday's deck on Saturday morning. And he's like, no, I lock it in a week ahead of time. I bring one extra card and maybe swap it in or that. That's so different. And I think it just showcases that to be a pro, you really have to find what works for you. And that's what stood out to me. He's like, I don't eat. I'm like, what? How do you not eat? I have to eat to think. And he's like, no, that's just not my thing. He just shows up at the tournament, sits down and shuffles it up. For me, I have to go on a walk and get my head straight and do all these other things. He's like, nah, just shuffle up, wake up, lock in,
I love that he plays the first 4 turns of the opposing deck and looks at his opening and what the mulligan's gonna look like, what's gonna do best against that opening turns 1 through 4. I think that's huge. I think I try to do that sometimes with some of my matchups, and I think it's important for everyone to know.
And also, I just want to highlight his choice of characters to take on that quest with him was insane. That was an incredible team. He just built it out right there.
Yeah, he has healer, he has a tank, he has the damage dealer. He's just very well rounded.
Yeah, I do picture Rapunzel, Mulan, and Baymax coming in, and Rapunzel's hanging out with Baymax, and Mulan's like, "Are we doing this?" And Rapunzel's like, "Wait a minute, I'm not ready yet." So, and Baymax is just silent. It would be so cool.
And Cogsworth is giving wisdom in the back.
I forgot about Cogsworth.
Cogsworth was the
genie
cherry on top.
Again, thanks everyone for being here and listening to this first episode of Quest Like a Pro. If you have questions for pros that you want us to ask, definitely check out purpleshadowgaming.com and connect with us. We'll be back very, very soon with another episode of Quest Like a Pro. And until then, good luck questing.